City Hall Council Chambers, 10 West Main Street, March 27th, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. If you would all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Can we have roll call, please?
Hoop,
Here.
Isom,
Here.
Kell,
Here.
Lottiehoff,
Here.
Schneider,
Here.
Thompson,
Here.
Walker.
Here.
Now we're down to public comment. Members of the public may make comments on any item which was not on the agenda during this time. The speaker shall approach the microphone and state his or her name and address. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes unless a longer comment is authorized by the mayor. The speaker shall direct comments to the mayor and the council as a whole. The mayor and councilors shall not engage in discussion or debate on items raised by members of the public, and no action may be taken on items raised in public comments in order to comply with open meetings law. With that, do we have any public comments?
Mark Eaton, 1007 South 10th Avenue. I attended the joint city council meeting on Wednesday. One of the hot topics was the rental of the space in the police station for the EM emergency management system. Emergency management is a taxing levy, and I noticed that they weren't seated at the table while you were discussing their rent or their possible rent. The county was, but the emergency management is their own taxing levy, and I think they should have had a seat at the table. I also wanted to make a comment because a lot of the councilors feel that the county needs to pay their fair share, and many of the county residents shop in Marshalltown and pay local option sales tax, which pays our debt. So I think you should maybe consider that when you're negotiating this lease as it goes forward.
Thank you, Mark. Do we have any other public comments?
Hello, Jim Shaw, 522 North 2nd Street. Surprise, I'm here again to speak about vicious dog ordinance and pit bulls. Because of the limited amount of time I had at the last council meeting, I will continue again tonight. 6-year-old girl was hospitalized following a dog attack so vicious she required over 1,000 stitches below her eyes and to her throat. First responders in Maine took Lizzie Norton to the Boston Children's Hospital after the attack. There, the small girl went through a grueling 12-hour surgery as doctors worked to repair her face and throat from the extensive wounds left by the pit bull. Her salivatory glands aren't working, and doctors said she won't be able to smile again because her face muscles are too damaged. Following the surgery, the girl remained sedated as she required the help of a breathing tube. Her mother, Dorothy Norton, said the doctors advised her that Lily would remain under intensive care for at least 10 days to recover. Doctors have also prevented her from looking in her mirror because her mother said she just looks too terrible. I wanted to cry, but I could not because she was looking at me. The pit bull mix behind the brutal attack belonged to a friend of a friend, the family says. The 6-year-old suffered a dog attack while at a friend's house. The dog, however, did not belong to the family friend, but instead they were pet setting the pit bull for another friend. They were going to play cards at the table, so she sat down at the table. The friend went to get the cards, and as soon as the friend walked back into the room, she screamed to her mother because the dog had Lily in her mouth. In another incident in Tennessee, a 3-year-old was hospitalized in critical condition after he was attacked by his family dogs. Memphis police reported that at least 5 dogs attacked the toddler around 5 p.m. this past March 6th. Responders transported the child to Children's Hospital in critical condition. The latest reports he's in critical condition but stable. The toddler's father now faces multiple criminal charges, including felony charge of child endangerment and harboring dangerous and vicious animals. Memphis Animal Services also cited the father for failure to maintain dogs, having dangerous vicious dogs, dogs at large, and rabies and vaccine tags. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Do we have anyone else who would like to address the council? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, mayor and council administrator comments. Does anyone have any comments tonight? Hearing none. The years of service, he is not here. Now I'm going to have Alicia read a proclamation.
So we have a proclamation by Mayor Joel Greer. Whereas on March 28, 1898, the citizens of Marshalltown voted to form a free public library, and whereas the volunteer directors of the Library Association gave their collection of nearly 4,000 books and $1,500 for this newly formed public library, and whereas this collection quickly outgrew its space at 6 to 8 West Main Street, and funding was requested from the Andrew Carnegie for a new building in the amount of $30,000. Whereas the city of Marshalltown gave the lot on the corner of Center and State Street for the new library building, and whereas on April 22nd, 1903, a gala dedication of the Marshalltown Public Library was held with many distinguished guests in attendance to celebrate the opening day of the Marshalltown Public Library, and whereas in December of 2008, a new state-of-the-art facility was opened at 105 West Boone Street. Whereas the Marshalltown Public Library has proudly served the residents of Marshalltown and Marshall County to provide materials and services that meet the needs for recreation, information, education, and cultural awareness for 125 years. Now therefore it be resolved that Mayor Joel Greer of the City of Marshalltown proclaims that March 28th of 2023 as the 125th anniversary of the Marshalltown Public Library, and encourages all citizens to be lifelong learners and visit the library to discover the many things it has to offer.
Thank you, Alicia. Sarah, do you have any comments?
I just want to thank the community, all the people in the past that have helped build our beautiful library. And today, we're very proud of our library, and I think it does an outstanding job. And I think 125 years is pretty amazing. And I won't be here for the next 125, but I know our library will be here serving our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, moving on to consent agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved, Your Honor.
I have a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. Roll call, please.
Kell,
Yes.
Lottiehoff,
Yes.
Schneider,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes.
Isom.
Yes.
Approve the minutes for the March 13th, 2023 meeting and the bill list in the amount of $938,553.63. Approve liquor license renewals for Hall of Fame concessions at 807 South 6th Street with outdoor service. Marshalltown Speedway at 1308 East Olive Street with outdoor service. Casey's General Store number 1441 at 1402 South 12th Avenue with ownership updates. The Spot at 217.5 North 13th Street. Yes Way number 1148 at 1701 Iowa Avenue East. Dollar General number 21858 at 104 West State Street. Food and Gas Mart at 613 North 3rd Avenue. Approve the February 2023 financial statements. Approve the Civil Service new hire list for a transit operator. Reappoint Nancy Harris to the Civil Service Commission, a 4-year term from April 1st, 2023 to March 31st, 2027. Reappoint Matthew Brodeen to the Plan and Zoning Commission, a 5-year term, April 1st, 2023 to April 1st, 2028. Reappoint David Schultz to the Board of Adjustment, a 5-year term, April 1st, 2023 to March 31st, 2028. Resolution 2023-53, setting a public hearing prior to approving the 5-year capital improvement plan for fiscal years ending June 30th, 2023 to 2027. Resolution 2023-54, setting a public hearing prior to approving the budget for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024, and certifying the property tax levy. Resolution 2023-55, setting a public hearing for the conveyance and transfer of title of city-owned vacant lots. Resolution 2023-56, declaring certain property surplus property and authorizing disposal thereof from the Police Department. Resolution 2023-57, approving a lease extension with the Marshalltown Community Theater. Resolution 2023-58, setting a public hearing for the conveyance and transfer of title of 906 South 11th Avenue to DJ Norm. Resolution 2023-59, setting a public hearing for the conveyance and transfer of city-owned land to Cynthia Lewis at 1021 South 5th Avenue. Resolution 2023-60, setting a public hearing for the conveyance and transfer of title of city-owned land to Eleno and Marcia Hernandez.
Thank you, Alicia. Moving on to resolutions.
Resolution 2023-61, approving a professional services agreement for $218,938 with Bolton and Mink for design services for the first phase of Riverview Park.
Your Honor, I move we postpone further discussion of this item until first regular meeting in May.
Yes, you may.
I will second.
We have any other discussions?
Your Honor, if I may,
Yes, you may.
can I ask why?
I think being the first in a series of decisions we're going to make on a pretty substantial project, and while maybe minimal in nature on the first portion of that from a retention pond perspective, I think some questions probably need to be answered that I don't feel are present today, whether it be the schematic of what a 100-year retention pond versus a 70 looks like, what's the impact on the surrounding neighbors and the investments going on in that part of the community from a business owner perspective. What benefits do we gain? Are there state and federal funding with regards to doing a 100-year in a more robust design? Just list a few of them. So I just think there's some questions that we probably need to get in front of us that I don't feel we have today in order to sit there and say, let's go spend $250,000.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes, you may.
So, Councilman Isom, are you wanting Bolton and Mink here and Jeff here, obviously, at that meeting?
I'm providing my list of questions and concerns to the parties that are interested in whether Bolton and Mink is here or not. As in material at the end of the day, I think the ownership truly lies with our staff in order to provide the direction and answers that I see.
Would you like to have it come back at a later date as a
Yeah,
discussion item?
First, my motion would be the first meeting, regular scheduled meeting in May.
Any other discussion? Jessica, do you have any comments?
Just what Councilmember Isom has described is what this first phase is basically increasing the size of the retention ponds so that any other work can happen. As you can see, what was in the packet for the timeline is that this is a lengthy process for design. Wouldn't have it going out to bid till December. I'm not sure that there's a huge impact on whether or not a bid is awarded in January, February, March, because obviously work wouldn't be starting before then, so there probably is some time there. But yeah, we can ultimately look at this, but what this is based off is the master plan that was brought forward last year around this time.
Any other comments, questions? Is there anything from the public? Let's call roll call.
Schneider,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes?
Walker,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes.
Isom,
Yes.
Kell,
Yes.
Bodyhoff.
Yes. Okay. Moving on to the next item agenda.
Resolution 2023-62 of support for the City of Marshalltown application for the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Tree Canopy and Tree Replanting Program.
Motion to approve, Your Honor.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Jessica, do you have some information?
Yes. So this application is for 140 trees to be planted in the right-of-way in our highest low to moderate income census tract, which is in the northeast part of town. And so Jeff was able, before he was out of town for a conference, he was able to put together some maps. I can't tell you there's not 140 exactly, there's 7 short on here, but we will be looking at this. So we're really looking at populating, Woodbury, Bromley, and then the avenues really going from 4th Avenue all the way over to 12th Avenue. So that's where we have the first set of trees with kind of a second set kind of getting a little bit closer to that Bromley and 11th Avenue area, and then really doing more over in the avenues. We felt that this was the important area to really to focus on, as there are requirements for people to plant trees in the right-of-way. They have to get a permit for it. And following the tornado, Trees Forever had done a lot of outreach in this area where individuals did not want to plant trees in the right-of-way. That was not something they were interested in. And so this is probably one of those projects that would allow for that area to be replanted. The requirements of the program are to use 10 different species, which are identified in the grant materials, and to have no more than 10% of each tree represented in this. So it would be a very diverse planting, which Kristen Titus, our park supervisor and horticulturalist, or our certified arborist, has said would not be problematic for planting that many trees at once when you have that much diversity. So the grant application is due, I think, April 10th or 11th. And so this is getting the resolution of support to apply for the $140,000 for the tree planting, and then the $7,000 in administrative costs that would come along with that.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions or comments from the councilors?
I have some, Your Honor. I guess, how do we select the given locations? One awesome thing to have come before us and getting some, I'd love to figure out how we get some additional people within our ward to replant. Trees are nicer than power lines, but I look at some of the concentration, some of the areas. Is there a way to spread all that out? Is the selection of the locations part of the submission, or just, okay?
Yeah, so we needed to be in a census tract that had a low to moderate income population higher than 51%. And so this area is, I think, at a 75 to 80%, definitely qualifies. We're also requesting probably more money than what other entities would, so we really wanted to make that case. It does look odd, maybe not so much on this one, but you can see that there are areas where there are not trees being planted, certain sides of the street. One of the things that we do review now with a right-of-way permit for planting a tree is what utilities exist. Is there a water line, water main that's running underneath there? Is there a storm sewer? Sanitary sewer tends to be in the middle of the street. You'll also notice that there's some that have an S behind them. That is because there's overhead lines in that area, so it would have to be a species that is not going to grow more than 10 feet. And so that kind of detail went into making these selections. So they're meant to basically be in an area where we would approve a permit if somebody was applying for it on their own.
So I guess maybe elaborate, just because I think this graphic's probably the best and the one I was referring to the most. Is there any reason we couldn't take some of the ones down here in Bromley that are along the entire street and say intermix them within Lee Street and otherwise areas? I guess that was my question. I said I don't know. Maybe it's better off that we get a tree line street long term across that rather than scarcity throughout and some isolated ones. But that was just my curiosity more than anything else.
Yeah, I think that's possible. Pending utility maps, I know Heather has been great at providing that information to Jeff and Kristen as they came up with this. And so I'd say we want to stay in a concentrated area because there is a 2-year part of the grant cost or the grant dollars can go towards watering for 2 years. And so there will be time on this where, because they're grant funded, we will need to maintain that requirement for watering. So staying in an area, but Lee Street and those others are just a block north. So we can certainly look at spreading the wealth a little bit more.
Your Honor?
Yes.
So these are all tagged, but we don't have permission from these homeowners yet, do we?
Because it's in the right of way, we do not require permission from the homeowner.
Okay, and then did Kristen give guidance on the species that are on the list in the grant that don't attack or try to interfere with utility lines under? I don't like the idea of them on one side of the street.
Yeah, so that's where anywhere there were utility lines, that's where the S's work out. But that's where it's about what's above ground and what's underground.
But I'm saying there are species that can be planted over underground utilities. They don't try and work their way into the sewer lines and the water lines and things like that.
I'm not sure of that answer, but I do know that Kristen did go through the species that were provided. We're working off of a detailed list. I'm not sure which of those are ones that might fit the requirement that you're talking about.
And then are we hiring, we using the grant to hire someone, or are we doing this internally?
Doing this internally with hopefully some in-kind volunteer costs as well. Looking at 2 plantings, one being a fall planting and one being a spring planting, to kind of break up the work a little bit. But yeah, looking at an internal with some in-kind coming from some volunteer hours as well.
One last question. Is there, I haven't read through this whole grant application, but is there a specific size of tree, how old the trees are that go in? I mean, what's the cost of each tree have to be to qualify for the $140,000?
So the grant is for $1,000 for each tree, inclusive of all your costs. And so I don't have a full budget worked out yet of exactly how that will work out, trying to incorporate the 2 years of watering. But ideally, we're targeting a $350 to $500 tree. And so Jeff had said typically a $350 tree that's been purchased by Trees Forever in the last year, that's roughly like 6 to 8 feet tall. So we're not talking about starting from small saplings. We're talking about having some decent sized trees that would be put in place very quickly.
Yeah, Gary, just to give you perspective, I did a tree or two in the last few years in our yard, and the last one we bought was a maple 4-inch in diameter for like 450. So not a small stick that we're putting in the ground by any means.
More of a caliper tree. Okay, any other questions or comments? Anything from the public? We have a motion in a second. Okay, roll call.
Isom,
Yes.
Kell,
Yes.
Lottie Hoff,
Yes.
Schneider,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes.
Okay, moving on to the next item.
Public hearing and resolution 2023-63, providing for the vacation of the east-west alley north of 328 South 3rd Avenue.
Okay, I'm going to declare the public hearing open at 5:52 PM. Do we have any written comments received by the clerk?
No, Your Honor.
Do we have any public comments? Okay, Jessica, do you have anything for us?
Yes, just as a reminder, this is the alley that is on the north side of the land that we own at 328 South 3rd Avenue. There were no utilities or anything in that alley that we need to be aware of, so we are vacating it in order to combine it with our larger parcel, which will get us up to about 0.8 acres that we will be putting out a request for proposal for in the very near future.
Okay, thank you. Anything from the council? I'll declare the public hearing closed at 5:53 PM and move on to the roll call.
Your Honor,
I
I'd
need
make
a
a motion to approve the resolution.
Thank you.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Thompson,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes.
Isom,
Yes.
Kell,
Yes.
Lottie Hoff,
Yes.
Schneider.
Yes.
Okay, next item.
Public hearing and resolution 2023-64, providing for the conveyance and transfer of title to a portion of vacated but unconveyed alley in the 900 block of South 11th Avenue to abutting property owners.
Declare the public hearing open at 5:53 PM. Do we have any written comments?
No, Your Honor.
Do we have any public comments? Jessica, do you have anything here?
Yes, just as a reminder, this is finishing the work that was started in 1961 with an ordinance to vacate and then actually resolutions and public hearings to sell the property to adjacent owners. We found that there were 4 that were not conveyed, and so this will be the process that's needed to actually convey those alleys to the individuals in the adjacent property. We will also be reaching out to them about affidavits of non-severability so that these little parcels don't get lost and they are forever then tied with the original parcel.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any comments from the council? I'll take a motion to approve. Oh, I need to close the public hearing at 5:54 PM. Can we consider a motion?
I'd make that motion, Your Honor.
Second.
I have a second. Let's have roll call.
Walker,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes.
Isom,
Yes.
Kell,
Yes.
Lottie Hoff,
Yes.
Schneider,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Okay, next item.
Public hearing and resolution 2023-65 to approve the urban renewal plan amendment for the Marshalltown Urban Renewal Area Number 4.
Okay, I'm going to declare the public hearing open at 5:55 PM. Do we have any written comments?
No, Your Honor.
Do we have any public comments? Jessica?
Yes, as a reminder, because this has been kind of a long process, we originally set this public hearing back at our last meeting in February, and this is for amending the downtown urban renewal plan with the specifics of our next item, which is a development agreement for Betty's Properties LLC for a total of $160,000 to be paid out over 10 years or $16,000 a year. So this action has to occur before any consideration of a development agreement can occur.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any comments from the council?
Your Honor, I have a question, if I may.
Yes.
Jessica, can you explain this line in your memo? The discussion item on February 13th mentioned using a minimum assessment agreement to achieve a valuation that was likely to produce the $160,000 over the 10 years to fill the gap needed. Reviewing the circumstances of the minimum assessment and the building permit valuation, it was determined that a minimum assessment agreement would not be the way to proceed, given the higher level of risk of things not working and having to come back to the drawing board with the city council. Can you explain that in more detail, please?
Yeah, so this is a project where, going back to where it started, they obtained the building permit, and I think it was October or November of last year. And so typically, that's not the process that we have, but we had the building permit valuation. And when I built a table on essentially how to try and achieve tax increment, rebate of incremental taxes equating to about $16,000 a year, there was about a $250,000 gap between that assessed valuation that would be needed and the building permit valuation, which was pretty significant. And so after talking with our attorneys at Dorsey and Whitney and knowing that this was, the $160,000 was a hard number to hit for the financing of this project, that's where we determined that the best way to achieve this without causing anyone coming back to the city council was to do it as a grant from the district rather than just a rebate of only the incremental value of that property. So if I use the building permit value in that table, what that came up with was there was about $10,000 a year being produced in incremental taxes from the property. So those will obviously still go towards the $16,000 grant, but that was not going to be enough to hit the $160,000 that was needed.
What is that value?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can email that to you.
So then that leads me to the next question. Depending on what that value is it better for us to let them have a 3-year tax abatement on their property only and then just do the grant for 7 years?
I would say I don't like to mix up those things because we specifically say in our urban renewal plans, we're not going to combine tax exemption and TIF. What that does is it really pushes the TIF farther down the road where things have a tendency to get lost if you're not recording them right away or starting things in the first year. The reality with property taxes is if this has a value as of January 1 of 2024, their first property taxes won't be due until 2026. So there's such a delay that it's easier to keep it as one item moving forward together rather than trying to commingle those two different tools.
I understand that, but what's the best for the urban renewal zone giving out $160,000 as a grant?
We have plenty of capacity in the downtown urban renewal area, so doing a grant of $16,000 a year is not going to, it's not going to damage the total increment available to fund any future grants.
And just one more question, if I may. Thank you, Your Honor. Once I know what that valuation number is and know what the percentage is of this 160,000 against that valuation, are we setting a precedent that that's the percentage we're going to grant for every new development downtown?
I don't know that there's a precedent setting. I think that's up for you to determine, but we had been targeting, based on the downtown master plan, between 25 and 33%. There is hopefully a point where we see projects start to not need as much. I'd say on a smaller project like this, that's probably, we're probably in that 1/3 area of what the building permit value was, but the total construction value is in the 800,000. So there's multiple numbers to look at, and that's just the thing is when you get a building permit issued, you don't get your full construction value recognized, and that just is what it is. When something hits the tax rolls, it's not with the full construction value.
The reason I'm asking, and maybe I see John wants to talk, John Hall from the chamber, is if this really is a precedent, does this help us get, if there's plenty of room in that urban renewal zone, is this a marketing tool we need to be out there pounding the pavement and telling people that this is something we're willing to do to spur that development downtown, in addition to, historical grants and everything else? I mean, is that a fair assessment?
Well, I would say that's something that we're talking about with just about anybody who is talking about doing new construction in downtown. It is our biggest tool. I would say this one is probably unique when you start to think about other new construction opportunities, just because it is below $1 million in construction value. If you think about probably the other lots that we're talking about in terms of new construction, we're probably over $1 million to go up another floor or multiple floors. So I think everything has some scale to it. I would say 160,000 is appropriate in terms of this project, in terms of percent. And if I had to guess, I would say we're probably closer to the 33%, which is in that target area that we had wanted to be. There's just more of the question of when do we reach a point in the whole district where 25 to 33% is a thing of the past and it's something less.
Your Honor, I don't want to get you in trouble since this is a public hearing. Can John even speak at this point?
I'll allow it. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, council members. John Hall with the Marshalltown Area Chamber of Commerce. Just really to echo kind of what Jessica had stated. I think there's the challenge we have with appraisals downtown right now, where we know that we've got to overcome that in order to be bankable. That's a big component of this project, where otherwise it could have been a bankable project if the appraisal came in at a higher number and would have diminished the overall ask to the city. To speak to the marketability, I think really the big selling point is, we came with a plan with an expectation of what we thought we could accomplish utilizing a tool that existed. We ran into some roadblocks and we were able to pivot and still meet the need in order to see the development continue forward. And so I think that speaks highly to the city and our willingness to come up with solutions in order to see those projects come through, because oftentimes that's the biggest sticking point for projects is when you get into the actual process and a roadblock is thrown up. It can become hard to navigate through that, but our willingness to navigate through that is in fact a big testament to the city staff and to city leadership. So I appreciate your time this evening on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, does councilors have any other comment?
Oh, I thought it was public hearing.
Yes, go ahead.
Mark Eaton, 1007 South 10th Avenue. So I've brought this up before. The Senior Living Center on the corner of 2nd Avenue and Main Street. It has its own personal 10-year sliding scale tax abatement. Now, if that's legal, then that can be used on these developments and not impact the school system or the county. And I know they're not here fighting for these things, but I'm a taxpayer and a shareholder in all those entities. So you don't have to do TIF grants and loans. You have a tax abatement tool that you can use that comes out of your own pocket, our own pocket, the city's own pocket, and not the other entities negatively impacting them. So they have to raise taxes to offset your gift to a private entity. The other thing is, okay, we want to develop downtown Marshalltown. but it seems that we are discriminatory in our gifting of money. We won't give to some individuals like John Hall, but we'll give to other individuals. And I meant John Hull, not Hall. So I think you really should work on that part.
Thank you.
Can I make a point of clarification?
Yes, you can.
So tax abatement basically means that the value doesn't go on the tax rolls for anybody. So it's essentially depressing that value for the school district, the county, and the city for the time period that it is in that abatement. When it is a TIF agreement, it actually allows for the county, city, school district, community college to collect on their debt service levies, and I think the PEPA levy and a few other levies that are out there. So there is some recognition of that value in terms of what it means for property tax levies for all the taxing entities.
Your Honor,
may I
respond? Simple.
Okay.
Okay, everything she said is good, but the problem is to get a TIF, I got to get 4 of you guys to vote for me. And to get a tax abatement, all I got to do is fill out a form. Thanks.
Okay, anything else from the council? Okay, I'm going to declare this public hearing closed at 6:05 PM and move on to the item. I need a motion.
I'd make a motion to approve, Your Honor.
Have a motion?
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Hoop,
Yes.
Isom,
Yes.
Kell,
Yes.
Lottie Hoff,
Yes.
Schneider,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to the next item.
Public hearing and resolution 2023-66 approving a development agreement with Betty's Properties LLC, authorizing annual appropriation tax increment payments and pledging certain tax increment revenues to the payment of the agreement.
Okay, I declare the public hearing open at 6:07 PM. Do we have any written comments?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, do we have any public comments? Hearing none. Move on to council comments. Okay, do a staff review.
Just really quick, I do want to mention that Doug Niederman was not able to be here tonight. He had a pre-arranged family matter, which prevented him from getting here. But I believe that John is here in his place if there are any specific questions about the project. This is, as we've discussed, a 10-year development agreement for a total of $160,000 being done as a grant of $16,000 per year.
Okay. Do we have any council comments? Okay, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed at 6:08 PM, and I would entertain a motion.
So
a
moved, Your
second?
Honor.
Have a motion?
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Isom,
Yes.
Kell,
Yes.
Lottie Hoff,
Yes.
Schneider,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to ordinances.
Ordinance 15060 to amend the Code of Ordinances, City of Marshalltown, Iowa by amending Chapter 76 Traffic Schedule, Schedule 8 Speed Limits, third reading.
Heather. Do I have a motion or a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
We need a second.
I'll make that motion. I didn't
Second.
hear the first one, so.
Second.
Okay.
Good evening, Heather Thomas, Public Works. Tonight is the third reading of the speed changes on Lincoln Way. I won't go into all the depth unless there's questions about how we've kind of come up with this from the first two readings. I did want to address one comment that we received today, though. There was a comment made that this was an unfair reduction to 30 mile an hour for speeding of just a few and not the general public on this. So the reasoning that we're really adjusting that, especially that eastern section from 35 to 30 mile an hour, is kind of founded on two parts. The curve at Brentwood Road right now The geometric design, so the horizontal radius of that curve, is designed for a vehicle not to travel more than 35 mile an hour. Today's engineering standards means that we would post that 5 miles less, so 30 mile an hour. While it's acceptable and historically it was posted at 35, that is part of that justification. Additionally, this is a minor arterial street through our city. And when we looked at crash data, this minor arterial street, when you take out the state highway, had the highest crash rating, number of crashes per foot essentially, of any minor arterial street in town when you take out those intersections. So combination of those two things is part of that justification for moving that 30 mile an hour further to the west. In addition to that, so this is the third reading tonight. After approval, if it's approved this evening, we'll go ahead and get that ordinance published. We would plan to install speed limit signs next week and hopefully have everything operational by the end of next week, so Friday, April 7th. In talking to the police department, they would use a 30-day warning period in enforcing tickets on this new speed. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Your Honor, I have a question for Heather.
Go ahead.
Heather, one of the things that was brought up to me, people living on this street, why does somebody on the 30 mile an hour zone coming out of their driveway, why do they get special treatment compared to somebody that lives on the 40 mile an hour zone? It's more dangerous for them to come out of their driveway. Why can't we have one speed limit from 12th Street all the way to Highland Acres Road?
When we looked at the review, this segment, we looked at the driveways coming out onto Lincoln Way. 95% of them have the ability to pull out headfirst onto Lincoln Way. Only 5% had internal where they would likely back out onto Lincoln Way. And all 5% of those between Highland Acres Road and Brentwood Road have the ability on their property to make changes so they could pull out head first. State requires this type of environment to be 45 mile an hour. That's the standard, and then you reduce it from there. We looked at the reductions, and we are recommending a reduction to 40 mile an hour because we don't want to change more than 10 mile an hour at a time in a single speed limit reduction. That requires additional signage.
Any other questions or comments? Anything from the public?
Lee Botter, 401 Orchard Drive. I am excited about this happening. The one thing that I would ask is when you are installing the signs, make sure it's not during the congested part of the day. In the morning, it is insane to try to get onto Lincoln Way, and in the evening it is. I travel that road at least twice a day. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the public? Anything from the council? Do we have a motion? Second?
Your Honor,
Yes.
since I promised some residents on this street that I would do this tonight, I will make a motion to amend this ordinance that the speed limit be 35 miles per hour westward from South 12th Street all the way to Highland Acres Road.
Okay, do we have a second? Hearing none, motion has died. Okay, back to the original ordinance. Roll call, please.
Kell,
Yes.
Lottie Hoff,
Yes.
Schneider,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes.
Isom.
Yes.
Motion passed. That's the end of our agenda. I'd like to thank everyone for coming. It's always good to have good discussion every 2 weeks. We're here, 5:30. With that, motion adjourned at 6:14.
Yep, I will do that. So actually.
Oh, what is it about public hearings? It just,
Process.
yeah,
You just have to do it over and over and over again.
yeah.
The last
not bad.
You actually wore a nice shirt tonight. And the meeting went 43 minutes, so I think you have to wear a nice shirt every meeting.
I didn't. Here I got off to such a good start.